In the early 60s, Japan was experiencing rapid economic growth. Amid this transformation, Seiko introduced a new line of watches that would stand as a symbol of precision and elegance: King Seiko. Born in '61, King Seiko was created to rival its sibling Grandseiko and to prove that Japanese watchmaking could match the finest standards in the world. In this video, I will take you through the journey of bringing a vintage King Seiko back to life, from its worn case to its final polished glory. You will see how careful craftsmanship restores not just a watch, but a piece of history. First, the watch is carefully disassembled. That begins with unscrewing the case back, and in this particular piece, it was a piece of cake. The thread loosened easily, a clear sign that the watch had been serviced not too long ago. Once the case back is removed, the movement is revealed in all its mechanical beauty. Then it's time to take out the movement from the case. To do this, I'll first remove the crown. With the crown set aside, the movement can be gently taken away from the case. Once the movement is free, we finally get a clear look at the dial, something that was hidden beneath the cloudy crystal. The indices and logo emerge in sharp relief, revealing both the beauty of King Seiko design and the toll that time has taken. This piece is truly special because it represents the first automatic King Seiko to achieve chronometer grade certification. At the time, this was a groundbreaking achievement for Seiko. Not only did it showcase the brand's ability to produce highly accurate mechanical movements, but it also marked a turning point, bringing automatic winding technology together with chronometer precision. Now we move on to the bezel removal. Using a specialized tool designed for this purpose, I carefully lift the bezel away from the case. Thanks to the right technique and equipment, the process is smooth and leaves no scratches behind. With the bezel removed, I can now take out the crystal. This particular King Seiko uses a crystal mounted on a special frame, which allows it to sit securely within the case. Once the crystal is free, I set it aside together with its frame. The plan is to replace the crystal during reassembly, ensuring the watch regains perfect clarity. As for the frame, it will undergo a thorough cleaning to remove years of residue. Now we come to the last part that stands in the way of the case restoration, the crown tube. This small component may look insignificant, but it's always a headache to remove. The crown tube is pressed fitted tightly into the case, and over the years it can become stubborn with wear and residue. But with the proper tool and enough carefulness, the crown tube finally comes away. With every part of the case now dismounted, we can finally begin the restoration process. This starts with the back of the case. Since it's normally hidden from view, it doesn't demand the same level of attention as the front, but it still deserves care. Years of wear leave scratches and residue that must be polished away. So I begin erasing the scratches with the help of hard felt and a coarse polishing paste. As soon as the deeper marks fade away, I move on to cotton polishing wheels with finer pastes. This gradual transition from coarse to fine polishing brings out the natural luster of the steel without compromising its structure. The process requires patience, but the reward is clear. The back of the case regains a smooth, scratch-free, reflective finish. Now it's time to restore the satin finished edge between the looks. Using this belt sander, I carefully remove the old scratches and recreate a clean, uniform brush texture. This area is small and easy to overlook, but getting it right makes a big difference in the final look of the watch. With a few controlled passes, the fresh satin finish appears, matching the original style and tying the whole case together. Then I can move to more important edges of the case. I start with the polished side edge. I carefully adjusting the angle on lapping device before I begin lapping it with coarse grit paper. Here the goal is clear. Remove the old scratches and restore a perfectly flat, sharp surface. This is the longest step in the lapping process. Every pass must be controlled with even pressure and consistent direction. It demands patience and caution, because one wrong move can round off an edge or distort the profile of the case. With that done, I move on to the finer grits. Each step designed to erase the deeper scratches left behind by the previous paper. At this stage, the goal isn't heavy edge redoing anymore. It's to make surface ready to polish. Every grit smooths the surface a little more, replacing deeper marks with increasingly subtle ones until the steel begins to take on a uniform sheen. In the middle of process, I decide to switch the tool I was using to control the angle between the lapping disc and the watch case. I made this change after noticing that the variable scratch pattern from the previous setup wasn't sufficient to achieve a flawless polish. When sanding occurs in only one direction, it can create a phenomenon known as comet tail, a subtle surface imperfection that becomes visible once the metal is polished. Since the goal here is a truly perfect finish, eliminating comet tails is essential. The tilt tables enable me to change direction of scratches from work on lapping device. When the lapping with the finest grit comes to an end, the surface is already close to a full polish, but a faint scratch pattern is still visible. That's completely normal. At this stage we shift from shaping the metal to perfecting it. Now the goal is to remove every remaining trace of those microscopic lines. Instead of sandpaper, I switch to polishing cloths charged with diamond particle sprays. The process is similar in motion, but far more delicate. Each pass refines the surface, replacing the last hints of abrasion with a clean, uniform shine. As I move through the progressively finer polishing cloths, the transformation becomes unmistakable. After the final cloth, the edge reaches a true mirror finish. The reflections are sharp, the surface is flawless, and the metal looks almost liquid. And this is just one edge. Once the remaining surfaces are restored to the same standard, the entire case will come together with a level of precision and elegance that rivals a factory fresh watch. The next surface to restore is the polished looked edge. Between the previous step and this one of my cameras took a fall and completely broke. So you might notice a few shots in this part of the video aren't up to my usual quality. If you enjoyed this restoration and want to see more videos with better visuals, I will leave you a link to my Buy a Coffee page. Any support will help me replace the damaged camera and keep improving the content I make for you. Thank you to everyone who's been watching, supporting and helping this channel grow. Back to the lapping. This edge is extremely small, so I start with a finer grit paper right away. Using a coarse grit here would remove too much material and risk widening the edge, which would completely change the original geometry of the case. Working with fine grit paper takes longer, but it gives me far more control, and with edges this delicate control is everything. Slowly I work the surface until both sides match perfectly. Once I'm confident the shapes are identical and the lines are crisp, I move on to progressively finer grits and finally to polishing. Each step refines the surface a little more, bringing the look edge closer to that clean mirror-like finish. And the outcome is glorious. The edge is crisp, reflective and perfectly aligned. But before we celebrate too much, let's hold on, because the next step will elevate the entire look even further. Up next is the brushed look edge restoration. This contrast between polished and brushed surfaces is what gives a watch its character. And getting that transition clean and factory sharp is one of the most satisfying parts of the whole process. Let's move on and see how the watch transforms once those brush lines are brought back to life. This step begins with lapping on a coarse grit paper to restore perfect flatness and shape. The goal here is to re-establish those clean factory sharp lines before adding any texture. Once that foundation is set, I switch to an even coarser grit. By moving the case steadily across the lapping disc, I create a series of perfectly aligned scratches. This is what forms the brushed finish. These lines need to be straight, consistent and parallel, because any deviation will be immediately visible once the watch is reassembled. After a few careful passes, the brushed pattern emerges clearly, and now we can finally see the result of our work. A crisp, uniform surface that brings back the original character of the look edge. Then I switch to my belt sander to give the side edge its brushed texture. After a few careful passes, the finish looks clean and uniform, exactly what we want. With that done, there is just one last surface left on the case, the back of the looks. This area requires a polished finish, so I return to the lapping machine and work it until the surface becomes smooth and reflective. Once that final polish is complete, the entire case is fully restored. Every edge, every plane, every transition now matches the original design. With the case finished, we can move on to the next chapter, the bezel. It has 3 edges to polish, so I mount the bezel onto my lapping device and begin working through them one by one. As I start, you might notice something interesting. The bezel rotates on the lapping device. That movement isn't accidental. It happens because of the friction between the bezel and the sandpaper. This natural spinning effect actually helps the process. It distributes the abrasion more evenly. That prevents over-polishing in one spot and results in a more delicate, controlled finish. With each pass, the edges become cleaner, sharper and more reflective, setting the stage for the final polish that will bring the bezel back to its original brilliance. The last edge of the bezel is done on the tilt table, because I wasn't able to adjust the lapping device to match its angle. Now that all 3 edges are restored, the bezel looks sharp, clean and ready to be reunited with the freshly finished case. With that done, we can move on to the case back. I start by restoring the satin finish on its flat surface. This area includes important markings, like the serial number, so I have to be especially careful here. The goal isn't to make it look brand new. It's simply to refresh the appearance without removing any of the original information. Using gentle, controlled passes, I recreate the satin texture while preserving every detail of the engraving. The result is a cleaner, more uniform surface that keeps the watch identity fully intact. Then I moved to the polished corners of our King. Not many people know this, but the Seiko King sub-brand was once a true rival to the well-known Grandseiko line. Back in the day, both lines were developed in different Seiko factories, pushing each other to make more accurate and better finished watches. Today, Grandseiko is more famous name and its prices reflect that. But if you want craftsmanship and finishing similar to Grandseiko without paying the premium, King Seiko is still one of the best choices you can make. The case back is done, the polishing work is complete, and now we can move on to the final stage, reassembling. This is the moment where all the hours of careful restoration finally come together. I start by disintegrating the old crystal along with its frame. To do this, I place the entire assembly into an ultrasonic cleaner. After a few minutes inside, the vibrations break down the old adhesive, causing the crystal to separate completely from its frame. This method is gentle, controlled, and avoids any risk of damaging delicate frame and in the meantime cleaning the frame. So now we are ready to glue in the new crystal. For this step I am using a clear epoxy adhesive. I could use UV glue as well, but for some reason I have always trusted epoxy more. It gives me a strong, reliable bond and plenty of working time. Once the epoxy is mixed, I apply a few small dots around the inside of the frame. Then I carefully position the new crystal, pressing it into place and gently spinning it to ensure the glue spreads even across the entire contact surface. This helps avoid gaps and guarantees a clean, uniform seal. With the crystal secured, I move on to the case tube. To mount it, I add a tiny drop of Loctite into the hole in the case. Then, using my plastic hammer, I gently tap the tube into position. The Loctite keeps it firmly locked in place, and the plastic hammer prevents any damage to the freshly restored case. In the meantime, the epoxy on the crystal assembly has cured enough, so we can move on to mounting it into the bezel. First, the gasket goes in, with a light touch of a sealant to ensure a proper fit. Then the crystal with its frame drops into place, sitting perfectly in the channel. With everything aligned, it's time to press the bezel back together. For that, I reach for my trusty old Sterncoins tool. It's not the newest piece of equipment, but it's reliable, precise and perfect for this kind of job. A few careful presses and the bezel assembly is complete and ready to return to the case. Now it's time to put the movement back into the case. Before doing that, the interior has to be completely dust-free and the crystal perfectly clean. Using a special dust removal pen and few gentle bursts of air from my blower, I make sure everything inside is spotless. Next, I carefully inspect the dial for any remaining dust particles or imperfections. Once I'm satisfied that the dial is clean and flawless, I can finally mount the movement back into the case. This step always feels rewarding. The watch starts looking whole again and all the restoration work begins to come together. Then I lubricate the crown tube and mount the crown back onto the movement. Once that's secured, I move onto the case back. I apply a light layer of lubricant onto the case back gasket to ensure a proper seal and long-term water resistance. With everything prepared, I screw the case back into place, closing the watch and bringing the restoration to the end. Now we can finally see the result. What started as a heavily scratched, tired-looking watch has been transformed into something that looks almost new again. Every surface, every edge, every detail has been brought back to life. It's always amazing to see how much character a watch regains once the restoration is complete. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you like to see more restoration like this, don't forget to subscribe. Your support helps me keep creating these projects and sharing them with you.